All right, everybody, welcome in to a special edition of the CanesInSight podcast, instant reaction show here. Doing something different today as Miami basketball has picked up a big transfer in Matthew Cleveland, just announced this afternoon, and I'm bringing on my friend Nick Firestone. Nick, I've had your dad on before in the old show back in the day, about 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say. And I've been wanting to get you back on. I know you have a lot of good insights to the program, and basketball wise, I've always respected your mind. We always go back and forth about Canes hoops for years. So when we've broken down the likes of Garius Adams and the such, it's exciting to now get into where we are now. And this is a big pickup in Matthew Cleveland. I think he's going to fit in really, really nicely, to this potential lineup next year. And look, a lot of what we talk about now in the next, 10, 15 minutes or so is going to be assuming, right, that Nigel Pack and Norchad Omier return, which it's expected both will. Obviously, they're testing the waters. But, yeah, I mean, excited to have you on right now. And, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, Pete. I feel like it's old school meets new school. You have my dad. This is the new generation of Canes with the transfer portal. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. I feel like anyone who watched, our Final Four run would say if we could have Jordan Miller back and Isaiah, right? Like we're a contender to win it all. And I think Matthew Cleveland, while he's not the exact same player as Jordan Miller, same size, kind of makeup as Jordan, right? 6'7", about 200, could kind of guard 1 through 4 and play that, new generation of positionless 4. And so really excited about the pickup. And it really fills one of our 2 big needs, I think, really to jump back into that national contender spot.
Now, you said it. They're not the same exact player, right? Similar body types. You could argue, and I don't think it's much of an argument, and this is no slight to Miller, but Cleveland is the better athlete of the 2, right? Now, Miller was, much more of a decision maker in Miami's offense than Cleveland was asked to be in Florida State's. A lot of what Cleveland was doing was as a slasher, in transition, right? Jordan Miller, he could be the point forward. He could post up, right, and be a playmaker from there. So I think Cleveland's fit in the offense is going to be interesting because they aren't the same player offensively. But his skill set is very intriguing, and you have to be excited if you're a Canes fan, understanding what Coach L has done. We say it every year with the transfers, right? But I think finding his role offensively, if you're a Canes fan, it's going to be an exciting thing to watch throughout the year.
Yeah, 100%. I think to find a 6'7", small ball 4 who can guard, can put it on the floor, can shoot it a little bit is tough, right? I know there's like Grant Nelson from North Dakota State trying to get one of the big dogs. Right. He's probably 6'11", different player than that, but it's tough to find this role, especially as a more developed player, right? So if you look at the numbers, they're actually pretty similar, right? I think Miller averaged 15 and 6, and Cleveland's 13 and 7. And if you go back, if you go back to Miller, because Miller's a 5th-year player, right? And so his game is going to be a little bit more developed. He's going to feel more comfortable getting to his spots. But I think if you kind of go back to a little bit of a younger Jordan Miller, right, the numbers are actually pretty similar. The efficiency, I think Miller was probably around that same 45% field goal that Cleveland was. They shot it a little bit similar. Miller a little bit more attempts from 3, but they're both around 70% from free throw. So, I think, are you going to get the 5th-year senior Jordan Miller, 55% plus field goal percentage? I'm not sure, but I feel like overall, if you can get that 15 and 7 out of the 4, somebody who can put it on the ground, be a mismatch, can really guard. And then I think the next step for Cleveland is going to be shoot it with more confidence. I know he shot 35%, but he didn't take many attempts. There was only 2 games where he made over 1 3 in his whole FSU career. So continue to shoot the 3 more often and more confidently. And then two, as you get into the half court, figure out what his spots are. I know Miller liked to go left, get fouls, and he had that little counter spin, one spin, and that became a huge, especially as you get to the tournament, that became like a huge move for us and just an area that we were confident in.
When we needed a bucket, it just seemed like that was the move that got it.
100%. Yeah.
In dire situations. I remember watching Cleveland a lot when he came in as a freshman to Florida State, because Florida State, who they get 5 stars pretty frequently, right? But you always want to see the new one that Leonard has over there, right? And I came away just honestly at the time looking at him, and because there were first round projections on him, I saw him being written about and seeing him in the mock drafts, right? You're intrigued, but it's like you said, his offensive game, especially at that point, right? And it's still developing. He took a big jump this year, I think. But he was a ball of clay at that point. And I think he still is, right? Which is what's exciting for Coach L and his staff. Listen, Leonard Hamilton and his staff, they do a great job every year, right? Acquiring talent and they do send guys to the league also. But I wouldn't say their guys are very developed offensively, right? That's not, these are a lot of times it's body types, it's athletes, defensive minded guys, right? Who the league says, well, if we can, get them a jumper, essentially, they can become, good players in the league. That's what I kind of saw Cleveland as, right? And I think the 3-point percentage jump this last year was huge, going from 17 to 35%. Again, not a huge sample size, but I think he was 21 of 60 this last year. Jordan Miller made 30 or 31. So it was maybe 2/3 of the amount of threes that he had made, same percentage, like we said. But if he can develop kind of that go-to, I don't know if he's gonna have a go-to move, but some sort of post game, right? Because he's gonna have opportunities. Again, being one of the bigger guys on this team, there's gonna be times that Omir's not in the game. You have Michael Nwoku coming in, right? But it's still, we don't know what his role is gonna look like. You'd expect for them to maybe add another piece or two, right? But Cleveland's gonna be asked to defend, I think, the 1 through 5 at points during this next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first thing, if we just talk about Cleveland in general, right? Like I think we're on the same page, right? Like similar role to Jordan Miller. If he can, the areas that Miller had that I think Cleveland doesn't is just kind of a little bit more of the development in the half court.
I think he has a better feel for the game in the half court for sure.
Better feel. But if you look at Cleveland's, I think, highlights from this year, he does actually have a little bit of the post, the quick, turnaround. He plays when teams zoned FSU, he played the dunker spot or the high post, and he can make moves. It's there. Is it as, I think it's a little rushed right now, so it'll just be reps doing that, and that comes with age. So I'm not totally concerned. I think from a defensive standpoint, he can provide what Miller provides. I think even with a little bit more rim protection, Miller may be, a little, I know they're listed as the same weight, but I think probably Miller a little bit physically stronger. But Cleveland average, I think, almost a block a game. I know some of it comes in transition and chase downs, but I think he can offer a very similar skill set. I think just for the next step, it's going to be refining the half court offense, continue to work on the 3-ball. I think if you go back to, obviously his freshman year at FSU struggled with it, but even if you go back to Pace, his senior year, I think he shot it in the 20s in high school. And I think as a junior, he shot it maybe 40%, obviously a totally different distance, but continue to work on his jumper. But this is the guy you want, right? A 3rd-year jump in college. You're getting them, with the age of one and done. This is the kind of guy you want.
Played in the ACC, so that's not it's not going to be a shock to him. The speed of the game.
And I think especially like if you look at Duke and Filipowski, right? If you look at teams around the country, you need a guy who can defend and be versatile. So I think this is the perfect fit for us. And then if you think about kind of like what's next for us, right, to replace, I think everyone's saying, all right, now we've replaced Miller. Can we replace Wong, right? And there's obviously different guys in the portal. We got, Dingle. But even if you don't get in the case you don't get a full replacement of Isaiah, you could technically still have Nigel, you could have Wooga, and then you could even put Cleveland at the 3.
Well,
Or,
and I would expect Keyshawn George to be
yes.
a big. I mean, everyone's penciling in, and I love Bensley, right? I think he's going to be a huge part of this team. I think he could be a guy who scores, close to double digits a game when it's all said and done, because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and he is a very efficient shooter. But Keyshawn George, man, I think he's not a young pup. He's going to be coming in almost at 20 years old, having played professionally overseas. I think he's going to have something to say about that starting lineup as well. And it may not be initially, but I think, as they find their groove look, it's going to be a much deeper team this year than last year's team. I can say that right now.
Watson too. I know you and I have said we're big Watson guys. I think to your point, like, we don't need to sugarcoat it. I think Benz is a really solid player, but having him and Pack as 2 undersized guards, I don't think that's really a recipe to make a deep run. So I mean, he's great as a 3rd guard, and I really like his kind of like stabilizing presence. He can shoot it a little bit, he can defend, but
listen, and I think he could be a spot starter as well for this team, without a doubt.
But that it's not when we're not really a contender to win it all with the backcourt of Pack and Benz. But I think if we can get like a Dingle, and now we have Jordan Miller role filled in with Cleveland, and then to your point, we got George and Watson off the bench, and I think that's on paper it's very comparable, if not better, than this past year's team.
Well, and I saw Luke Chaney reported as well that Van Allen Lubin from Notre Dame visited as well on Friday. So that's look, I think everyone, and listen, we're guilty of it as well. We just spent almost 10 minutes comparing Miller and Cleveland. But everyone's always going to look for that replacement.
Yeah.
You're not going to always find the exact replacement to a player that leaves, but that's what makes, I think, Coach L and what he's been able to do over the years, the way that he's been able to kind of transform the roster, even 4 or 5 years ago when things didn't look like they were very pretty, right? He found a way to reinvent the way that he built his roster. So I think the way he's looking at it is you need more long athletic wings who can defend, who can shoot. This team didn't have enough of that overall last year.
Yeah, but I still think, like, to your point, 100% agree. But I think, like, the blueprint is there, right? We have a lot of the pieces still in place. If we can get a 2, if we can replace Miller, which I think we have, I think the blueprint is right there. And we're in a really good situation with still veterans who have been there in big moments. I think we're right there to win it all if we can get, that 2. And I would say this, I know I talked about kind of what Cleveland has that Miller or Cleveland doesn't have, but I think if we think about, like, what does Cleveland have that Miller doesn't have, it's kind of that additional athleticism, that length. I think he's a little bit longer. I think there's been reports of
when he's getting downhill. Getting downhill, I mean, whether it's in transition, but even in, like you said, when he makes the decision to make his move towards the basket and get downhill, you aren't stopping him. I mean, once he gets going,
there's a reason. Go ahead.
No, that I was leading you right into probably what you were going to say. That he was a 5-star recruit.
Yeah, I think there's a reason he's a 5-star, and he's a high, a bigger NBA prospect than Miller, right? If you think about potential, it's his length. I think he's longer than Miller. I think he's more athletic, and he's kind of a glider, not as much of an explosive athlete, but he's a glider and really smooth plus athlete who can finish, in a variety of ways that I don't think Miller really had. Miller obviously really rock solid player, but I think it's kind of that upside that Cleveland has that Miller doesn't have, and just elevate your overall athleticism for the team. That excites me, and I think the 2nd to 3rd year jump. Now he's a seasoned player who's played a lot of minutes in the ACC at a high level. I think he's really the kind of guy who's primed for a breakout.
And not to mention that this was a huge recruiting win for Miami over Auburn, a Bruce Pearl who, has his history as one of the best recruiters in the country, obviously, and they've had a lot of recent success. And that, listen, he's going to be coming into a Miami team where there's already guys who are very well established as well. So for him to make that decision, number one, he feels confident about his own abilities. But he said it himself in the interview he did with ESPN that wanting to win and the track record at Miami the last few years with the transfers was a big part of his decision.
Who does he remind you of? I know we all like comparisons.
Well, you made a comparison. You texted me someone before. I really, to tell you the truth, haven't sat down and I've watched a good amount of him at this point now, but I'll let you give your comparison while I think about.
Yeah, I think there's two guys who he reminds me of, and the first one is going to be Scotty Barnes, just because I think he has the high socks, FSU 5-star, and his game is a little bit. While you see flashes of it, it looks a little bit loose or not. It's kind of like Clay, like you said, it's not as defined and refined. Where he makes moves and it will wow you, but it just doesn't look as smooth as somebody further along the line. He doesn't have the same strength as Scotty, but he still kind of reminded me a little bit of him. And then the second guy a little bit is Talon Horton-Tucker, where he has those really long arms. You feel like
that one.
He can get to the basket and has an array of finishes. But again, as he needs to develop his game in the half court, similar to THT, there's still areas for improvement. And same with the shot. THT still had some questions about his shot and his confidence with it. I think the same goes for Cleveland.
It's kind of because they're manufactured jump shots, right? These guys aren't pure guys who are coming out of their mom's womb as shooters, right?
Yeah.
There are just guys who are born shooters. Obviously, you work at it, but that's why I think there is that similarity, and I think the way that they both move, right? The strides are similar, but again, I want this THT. I think was a much more of a ball handler at this point,
for sure,
of his career. Which look, you would expect part of the recruiting pitch from Coach L and the staff is we are going to take your game to the next level. We're going to ask you to do things you weren't at, because every player deep down believes part of the reason they are, where they should be is because they maybe aren't being put in a position to do that. We don't know, and I don't want to jump and make any conclusions here that I'm not completely sure about, but you would have to assume that he wasn't being given as much responsibility in the offense of Florida. Again, from what I've seen, a lot of it is slashing buckets, quick moves to the basket, but he's not there being asked to run the offense essentially, right? And be a playmaker, right? So I would have to think that one of the recruiting pitches was, we're going to put you in a position and help you evolve your game and do things that you weren't necessarily asked to do at Florida State.
Yeah, even if you just take a look at his highlights, right, a lot of them are coming in transition, or he's making a quick move from the perimeter downhill, or when like I said, when they face zone, he's at the high post and he's making a move, but you don't see as much, and you do see actually a little bit of him starting to post up and hit some shots, but you don't necessarily see him getting get the ball in the same spots as where Jordan Miller was getting it, 18, be able to face up and make a move. It was much more of a perimeter game, which it seemed like he did a good job at, but I don't know if that's kind of where his role is at the next level. So yeah, I look forward to him being put in better spots and better structure and in a more specific role. I think that's the thing about us is, we have a lot of established guys and roles, and I think his role is a lot more clear for us. And I think as you think about guys taking the next step, they have a clear understanding of their role and they execute it at a high level, which can take your team to, championship level.
Well, let's see who else they add. I don't expect them to add a ton more, maybe 1, 2 at most, right? But I think one more guy for sure. And we'll see. Probably another guard. But I know a lot of Canes fans are looking for a big man. I think they're pretty excited about Michael Nwoku, right?
Yeah.
But another rotational big, or yeah, it's tough to ask for a stretch four because Cleveland's there now, so I don't know who's going to come in and kind of accept a bench role, but a rotational big, a la Julian Gamble, may I say?
I do like Nwoku. I watched him at Prolific Prep. He played against my high school. I think in the summer, Harvard Westlake, and he's an explosive athlete. He's strong. He's more physically built, and I think we need a 5 like that, right? Do we have a stretch big? Probably not at this point. But I think the missing piece is that 2. And if we can get, even somebody who can come in for a little bit of time and be a stretch big, that would be helpful.
Man, let the people know you were throwing alleys to Eric Swope back in the day at Harvard Westlake.
Shout out East Swope. Shout out East Swope.
So, Nick, before I let you go here, like you just said, you're out there in La La Land. How about Lonnie Walker last night? I know you were at the game. What did it look like for him last night live? And is he going to have a bigger role moving forward here for the Lakers?
So I'll be honest, I've been one of the bigger Lonnie haters this year. Like, I love Lonnie the guy, but I think his role, he doesn't necessarily always play a winning style. He can get buckets, but he takes a lot of inefficient shots. He doesn't feel like it doesn't seem like he knows when to pick his spots. And then he kind of can lose focus on defense. So I've been really frustrated with him and his fit with kind of Braun and AD and the Lakers. But I feel like last night he really, for a guy who's been out of the rotation for 2 months, to stay locked in and be able to come into a big game 3 and play really good defense. I think he was a lot more physical than Troy Brown. And just I think when you play the Warriors, you need to be physical. You can't let them come off their screens in comfort, right? And he was really physical, and then he hit a big 3, and he always has, the explosive ability to score in bunches. But I didn't feel like he was really forcing it. I think he came in, he actually had a charge, and I was like, oh, here we go with Lonnie again.
Yeah.
But he hit a 3, he picked his spots, he played really good defense. And I think it's a testament to him and his focus. And I think like he's actually a guy who raises the Lakers' ceiling, right? Because of his upside. I think earlier in the year, he was probably our 3rd best player at times. But if he can just play that role, get buckets and play defense, I think that's a guy who can make a lot of money in the league, right? It's the difference.
I was literally just gonna say it. We need him to add to what Bruce Brown has done, and Bruce already got paid, obviously. Yeah. But we need all those guys to have all the success they can have, because listen, it's an easy sell on the football side, the NFL success, right? So need to add that component to the basketball side as well, and I think that's kind of an underrated part of what's going on here. Everyone talks about the success on the floor, and that's number one, right? The Elite Eight, Final Four back-to-back years. But let's see, man. Maybe Jordan Miller gets picked up here, 2nd round. He makes a roster and makes an impact. You see more undrafted and late-round guys every year than ever before becoming really good players in the league. So more success leads to more recruiting success, and then, more wins for the Canes. But Nick, man, appreciate you coming on today. We got to do this. We got to do this more for sure.
Appreciate you, Pete. Thanks.